We've done two interviews already with Tom Block. The first interview was looking at what it takes to win an award, how to write proposals that are effective, making bid, no bid decisions. The second interview examined the process of the actual physical making of the award. There's negotiations that have to go on between the bidders and the buyer. The buyers have to prioritize proposals and make a final decision. This is the third and last interview that we'll conduct today, and in this interview we're going to take a look at what happens in the post-award phase, life after the award being made. So Tom, welcome again to our interviews here. It's good to have you here. Let me start off by asking you a question about some of the people issues that you have to deal with. Once you've won an award, very quickly you have to establish a relationship with someone who the government calls a contract officer's technical representative, the COTR. Private sector will very often call this person a contract specialist, but this is your main point of contact in the buying organization. What are some issues that we should be aware of in establishing relationship with the COTR, or the contract specialist?
Before I answer that question, David, I'd like to go back to your comment saying life after award. Sometimes this is like a death march, and it may not be life too long, short-lived. Some of our contracts are highly optimistic in their estimations and get in trouble very quickly. But before I get into that, during the process of the contract, let me answer that question about the people on the buyer side that you're going to have to deal with. The contracting officer, the contracting officer's technical representative, or this contract specialist. As a project manager, on the day of contract award, you're going to feel a sense of elation that you've done a great job in putting together a proposal, and now you've got the real work ahead of you. Get this thing staffed up, get an understanding among your team on what's going on this contract or this project. Now, there's other people involved here. The people that are going to be looking for your contract performance from the buyer side. And you're going to have to spend some time schmoozing with them. You're going to have to spend some time talking to them, finding out how you're going to interact with them throughout the contract process. In the government side, you would have the Federal Acquisition Regulation as a guide on how where the contracting officer and the contracting officer's tech rep fit into this process. However, in the civilian side, it is not that clear, and most companies do it very differently. So from a civilian type of proposal or a corporate proposal, a private sector proposal, you're going to talk about quite a bit of time trying to figure out what's the relationship, who the players are. And one of the mistakes that many of us make is, as project managers in our early career, is that we think that the real focus is on our ability to manage that project. But a very important part of it is the people, the buyer side, that are going to be looking at your performance. The other mistake that we make many times is that we assume that when the request for a proposal comes to us, that this is a corporate group think, that everybody in that organization or everybody in that government agency feels that this is what they need. Then you wake up one morning after contract award and you start getting some phone calls and people talking to you, visiting you in your office, and trying to say that they would like to have this into the proposal, or this into the contract, or we forgot this in the RFP. And so you're going to be pulled from pillar to post on many of these issues, and you're going to have to set up a process in your own mind on how much of this you're going to accept and how much you're going to reject. And it gets into what we like to call a change control process. So you can't be too rigid at the beginning. On the other hand, you can't be too forgiving and too accepting of all changes. because later on, when the project may be getting in trouble because of things that you had accepted that weren't really in the scope of the work, it's very difficult to now take a hard line. So you're going to have to use your judgment and see how the people react. Keep in mind that the buyer wants to work with people that they can get along with. If you're going to be a burr in their saddle throughout the entire process, they're going to be looking for things that are going to come down on you hard if it doesn't go the way they'd like to have the contract go. So this relationship is very important. Some companies will establish a relationship manager in between, but I don't prescribe to that because I think that's the role of the project manager or the program manager. That's the important person. That's the person that should be seen. That's the person that the buyers should be going to look for any changes or any alterations to the contract.
Well, just to clarify something, when organizations do use relationship managers, what is the charge of the relationship manager? What is he or she supposed to be doing?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer because it varies so much, and the term itself is not clear on what the duties are. But the idea is to bridge the gap between the project manager, the program manager, and the client, assuming that there's a lot of customers out there on the client side, and they're trying to filter that information. And a lot of that time spent by the relationship managers in meetings and clarifying various things on the contract. Now, the reason I don't prescribe to this organizational structure is because if the project manager, the program manager is not in that meeting, then there's a filtering, or there's things that are going to be misinterpreted and may cause misunderstanding from the program manager. If the program manager is in that meeting with the relationship manager, then I think you've got a waste of resource there. Why have two people from the same organization to the same meeting when it looks like the real issue here is who's in charge? Is the relationship manager in charge of the project, or is the project or program manager in charge of this piece of business?
Yeah, I can see where there may be some dangers with the relationship manager where the customer begins seeing the relationship manager as the person really in charge, and if they got some beef with the project, they go to the relationship manager as the arbiter making the final decisions, and that really can undercut the program or project manager. Okay, well, I'd like to get back to the original intent of my question here, which is you have, let's say, this point of contact in the buyer organization. Government calls them a contracting officer's technical rep. Private sector might call them a contract specialist. What kind of, being specific here, what kind of relationship will the project manager develop with these people? How do they determine how to deal with these people?
Well, I think you have to have a close relationship with these people. There's a certain extent of what you can do and what you can't do because of the requirements by the Federal Acquisition Regulation. But you want to look at it from your point of view as a project manager. You got to do whatever makes good business sense. You also have to feel what the contracting officer, what their role is, or the contract specialist, and see they're trying to get the best for their organization. And many times you're going to have a conflict there between what you think is best for the contract and your organization and what the customer wants. So I think that an understanding, sometimes you may have some people that really don't understand what's in the request for a proposal or in the proposal, because you're looking with contracting officers that may be dealing with a number of contracts. They don't have the real insight, but yet they require by law to make certain decisions on information that is passed to them.
Well, do you have, with these people, do you go out to lunch with them? Do they become your best buddy in the world? What happens if they become, or what can you do to prevent them becoming your enemy, in a sense? If the person that you're dealing with in the buyer organization winds up becoming very hostile towards you, I can see that would be very uncomfortable.
Well, it will be uncomfortable. They become hostile, and you know one of the things that I've always looked at is what kind of personality do we have here from on the customer side? Are they the type of person that everything has to be followed directly according to what was proposed, or is there some give and take? Earlier I mentioned in the previous interview that we have to make sure that we respond to the RFP, not more because of we over-engineering, not less because we may be thrown out because we were non-responsive. But in the real world, we're going to now be asked to do certain things, and we're going to be asked to do certain things that may not be in the scope or our understanding of the scope. If we have a contract that's cost plus, this could be a benefit to the seller, because here's an opportunity now to open the contract to further expand the work and to further expand the revenue. If it's a fixed price contract, then we have to be very careful that we don't give away what we call give away the store here, because we'll be accepting work that we may not be able to get paid for, and eventually it may become the one item that's going to cause delays in other schedules. So we have to use a little bit of common sense, a lot of common sense really, and some wisdom here, and to kind of get a feel for which way the organization goes. A lot of these organizations have organizational reputations. For example, I've been on government deals where they say that this agency really is very strict on everything that's in the proposal, everything that's in the RFP, and they don't like to deviate. And they'll go through a formal process anytime there's some change, where other agencies may be a little loose. And you have to play the game or the business model the way they have it in their minds.
Tom, you've just raised one of the most important issues that we're concerned with in the contract administration phase of a project, when we're actually doing the contract work, and that is this whole issue of change control. Anyone who has any experience in managing contracted projects realizes that a nightmare they want to avoid is something called scope creep, where you have uncontrolled change occurring, which can lead to cost overruns and schedule slippages and low quality products. What I'm concerned with here is the pressures that you feel. What are some of the pressures? Because I know throughout the life of the project you're going to have tremendous pressures. What are some of the pressures that you're feeling here that create change control issues on a typical contract?
The pressure is always to determine whether the client wants to get free work, and whether they're really something that has to be changed, or they're just looking and saying, how far can I go to get as much work done without having any additional money to put out. And I can understand that viewpoint. So we're going to have some kind of a change control process. Let's go back to where this will appear first. It'll maybe appear in the RFP when the client asks you how to describe your change control process, and if it doesn't, it behooves you to put a change control process in place. Something that's realistic, something that can be managed, and something that you intend to implement when a change comes up. You have to be careful here now, because it can get too bureaucratic, and I recall a point in time when on a project many years ago, it was with the government, where we didn't have a change control process in place. We weren't very astute in the project management discipline, and we accepted a change to a module, which ultimately became the sticking point in being able to deliver any of the other modules on time. So here we were negotiating, or trying to to get this module that we really hadn't even bid on in the first place, to get that corrected so we could get the rest of the contract. And we were getting beat up by the contracting officer and the contracting officer's representative because we weren't meeting our delivery schedule. So what we did is we said we need configuration management, and we told that the client, and they agreed that we need to have some kind of process in place. So we did I think the mistake is we put in a full-blown configuration management process, which on the surface looks so bureaucratic that it would take forever to get any change through the process. Again, keeping in mind that these are delays which are ultimately going to affect the entire project schedule. And if they haven't been done, or the risk of assessment hadn't been done early on when we actually put our plan together, we are now building in automatic delays into our schedule. So you're going to be always asked to add a little bit of something or to tweak a little bit of something on the project, and as a project manager you're going to have to use your judgment. Again, like I mentioned earlier, that you can't start off easy and then try to be hard. So you have to be careful. I mean, there is some give and take. Business decisions have to be made. Promises are made sometimes that said, you know, if you do these kind of things, we're going to add an additional amount of money to the contract. You want to be careful of those, because you want to be careful who you're talking to that's making these promises, because there may be some differences between what is being said by the technical people and what the contracting officer is going to allow them to do. So you have to be careful that you don't be sucked into accepting a change when there is really no authority to make that change.
Well, let me give you a kind of a scary hypothetical. Let's say the general, okay, with quotes around general, you know who I mean, a very powerful person, the one who has the ultimate the authority to control budgets, says to you, I am the customer, this is the change I want, implement it. How do you deal with something like that?
Well, the first thing you do is say yes sir, and when while you're on the phone, especially if you're a junior person and spend some time in the military, you may be overwhelmed by the general calling you directly. The proper response is, gee whiz, that sounds like a great idea, but before I can accept that, let me see what the ramifications are going to be on our budget, on any other technical issues, and on our schedule, and let me get back to you. Certainly, if you've got a cost-plus contract, say, well, that's great, and I believe that that's necessary, but let us look at it and see if we can't do that in the next release of this piece of software, so to speak, version 2, as opposed to affecting the schedule at this point. And I think if you take that approach, it means that I haven't said no, but I want them to make the decision on whether they'll accept that risk on the impact of that decision. And the general may not even be in the proper line of the contracting process, and you're going to have to then take this request to the contracting officer and say, okay, perhaps we need a meeting of minds to see who's going to be actually directing us to do further work. So it can get pretty heated sometime. It can get pretty fuzzy, and the thing about it is, don't let it go too far, because it's better to handle the issue immediately than to allow things to progress where everybody accepts that that's the way the contract's going to be run. So it's difficult to change it after you've been running it into a way where people think that they can call you at any time and give you a change.
Well, the example of the general requesting this change, as you just mentioned, it makes a difference if it's a cost-plus contract, but that's exactly what you were talking about a few minutes ago when you said there's also opportunity, because then you negotiate an amendment to the contract, and this means more work, provided all the key people who are in the loop, such as the contract officer, support this particular amendment.
I have one other thing that I would like to bring up, and this was a real situation where I was called one day. I wasn't the project manager, but I was directly reporting to the project manager. I got called by one of the chief technical people in the data center from the client side, and he said, you mind if we can go out for coffee? And we had a real issue here because in the contract it said that the government would have 2 weeks, 10 business days, so to speak, to review all design documents and give us a turnaround. Well, what wasn't understood or even visualized when the contract was awarded, that the design document was about 3.5 feet thick, and there was no way that this government agency could turn this around in 2 weeks. Now, this turnaround was holding up the rest of the work, so the technical guy said, let's go to coffee, I want to talk to you. And he said, what we're going to do is probably add maybe $250,000, which was big money at the time, to the contract if you will agree to make any of these changes as a result of us coming up with the design, any problems we have in the design document. And what we want you to do is agree that you'll do the maintenance if we allow these changes to happen, and you can take them up in the maintenance process. Well, I thought this was a great opportunity to get a change to the contract, since it was a cost-plus contract at this time. This is just an example of how changes can happen and agreements can be made. But this was not a formal agreement, so we had to go really to the contracting officer and put it in writing and so forth, that we would then accept a certain amount of money and do the maintenance of this system after it got up and running, and accept those changes through the maintenance contract as opposed during the development contract.
An important component of contract administration is reporting. It could be progress reporting, some other type of reporting, but as a project's being carried out, the contractor often has a number of reporting requirements to meet. So can you share with us your views on what some of the issues that a contractor needs to consider when meeting its reporting requirements?
First of all, you want to make sure that you understand what the reporting requirements are. And this normally is first identified in the request for proposal, where the agency will say we would like to have a meeting on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, quarterly basis, or all of those, depending on what level in the organization at different times. If there is no reporting requirements in the RFP, I suggest strongly that you put one in your proposal, because keep in mind that all of this data gathering for this reports and all the people involved in meeting to get all the information together is costly and can delay your schedule. So you should have that in your schedule, the accumulation of report data, and you should have somewhere in your proposal of what you intend to give and how it's going to be presented, the format of your weekly report, for example. Keep in mind that the reports can be very deceptive, because if you've a type of individual who wants information from your folks to be as honest and as truthful and candid as possible, then you'll probably get good information, and you'll probably get good news and bad news. And if pretty soon you get too much bad news and you start cutting off that line of communications, people are going to give you what you want to from their standpoint, what you're interested in. And this can lead to a real embarrassing problem that will happen over a period of time, where you'll be reporting progress, and everyone will feel like that there's good progress on the project, and then one day somebody's going to come up to you and say, well, we can't meet that deliverable, and all of a sudden you as a project manager are very embarrassed, because you've been leading the customer to believe that that deliverable is going to be on time within the confines of the project, and now you're going to have to go forward and say, oops, we made a mistake. So be very careful on how you accept bad news or information that you'd like to not hear, because pretty soon people are going to start feeding you just what they think you want to hear. We had a situation where this happened to us on a project where we had to report every Friday in front of the customer's people, the contracting officer, the contracting officer's representative, people from the data center, the technical development people, and some from the business side. And this was at least a 2 or 3 hour meeting every Friday, very time consuming for our key leaders on our project. But in order to get that information, we had to start on Thursday with our major managers on the project, and for them to get their information, they had to start on Wednesday with the people down in the lower part of the project. So here we had information that was about 2.5 days old, so to speak, or the people started projecting what would happen on the status on Friday when we actually had the meeting. Our project manager reported that we had all of these test cases ready to go through systems testing, and that they could come down, the client could come down on Monday and do the test cases. About 10 o'clock on Monday morning, the COTR came running into the project manager's office, and I happened to be sitting there, and he said, "You lied to me." And the project manager was stunned, pushed back in the seat. "What do you mean we lied to you?" He said, "You said on Friday morning that we had all the test cases were ready and we could come down on Monday. I've just been there to run some test cases and the system module is not running." Well, we had no idea that that was the case, because nobody had said that situation, and the COTR was the first one into our office to give us that information. In investigating this, it turned out that the people had assumed that by Friday or Monday that things would be done, because they had all weekend to get these test cases compiled and run through the system. What they didn't know is that the data center was going to be down that weekend for maintenance. And here we were reporting information in advance, expecting it to be done, instead of actually reporting the exact situation as it was at that date. So you can get into this trap by saying, well, by Friday we should be done. What you got to do is make sure just whatever is done or completed is completed, whatever is open is still open, and leave it at that, because you don't want to get into a situation where your trust and confidence is now being questioned, and pretty soon nobody's going to ask you, nobody's going to trust you in any of the things that you have to bring forward, especially in some of these issues where there's a lot of judgment involved.
Tom, who, again, you have these reporting requirements. Let me just ask a couple of questions here and then just answer them one by one. Okay, what are the principal reporting issues that the contract office is concerned with? What are they going to zero in on?
They're going to be zeroing in on completion deliverables based on what the RFP asked for and what you've responded for in the contract, and they're going to also be looking at the payment schedule. So they're going to be looking at really what the contract calls for. The technical people that are going to be looking, or the COTR, are going to be looking at, is the deliverable acceptable? Has it been tested out? Does it meet the specifications?
Okay, and then presumably also everybody's, it's built into what you just said now, everyone's concerned on schedule performance. Are the milestones being achieved properly? Obviously the contract office is not going to pay for work that hasn't been achieved on time until the work is actually physically achieved. Are there any other players then who are going to be reviewing the report data that are stakeholders that have an interest in what the reports might say?
Well, your people in your own corporation or your company from the project management side are going to be looking at your progress, certainly. They're going to be also looking at, are you making the deliverables in time to get the money into the corporate side, because there is a lag on the billing and getting actually cash into your organization. Within the agency itself, as you move up the ladder, there's going to be some very critical eyes on saying, are you meeting your deliverables? Are you making your milestones? A lot of these agency directors on the government side, if you're looking at a government organization, are going to be interested because Congress may be wanting to know what's the progress on these major projects, for example. Now, it's just not in the government where this happens. We were on a project where one of the CEOs, when working with the stock analysts, made a statement that this new system for rental cars is now going to be available by such and such a date, and it's going to do wonders in being able to coordinate all of these various rental car companies that they had acquired. This set an expectation of very optimistic, and the expectations that revenues are going to grow as a result of this. But the CEO failed to coordinate with the major program director on this, and didn't realize that there was going to be a major delay in the deliverable on this system. And as a result, there was a lot of embarrassment in the public sector, and not in the public sector per se, but in the communications to the public, that here the CEO is making this statement, and there's no backing to that statement.
Tom, you make a good point when you state that sometimes the information we are getting in our progress reports is questionable. And I'd like to follow up on this issue a little bit here. It seems to me that if you have effective contract administration, you have to establish processes where the information you're getting in progress reports is somehow confirmed or validated. Can you give me some reaction to that perspective?
Well, human nature wants to hear good news and wants to accept these things. You don't want to keep on accepting the fact that your organization or your project is incapable of meeting deliverables. And so there's a tendency to accept reports from the ranks of the project as accurate and as valid as possible. Now, there could be a misunderstanding between you as a project manager and what the team leaders are reporting. And an excellent example, which these things happen to you and you don't realize they're happening to you, but then they become major things to remember. We had a major project where we had a number of deliverables and people reporting complete. And completion, yet we couldn't bring the system up. And it turned out that the project manager's definition of complete was completely different from the task manager was, or from the project team member. When the project team member was complete, was they were finished coding. When the task manager was a thing, they had compiled it and they had turned it over to be testing. The project manager's idea was after it has passed unit testing and customer testing, that's complete. So we had different completion definitions. As a result, the reports looked like they were fabricated. In reality, there was no really intent to deceive. It was just a misunderstanding. So you have to be very careful that you have a clear understanding what complete means. Now, the contracting officer and the contracting officer's technical representative are going to be playing devil's advocate and asking these type of questions, and really can be very embarrassing if you don't have a solid answer. Now, this happens because in the putting together a proposal, we put together probably a very general schedule, and we didn't take the time to define all of these deliverables to that degree, because at that point we weren't sure we were going to win the deal or not. Now you got this, you're in the award, you're now performing, you got to take some time to really identify and define some of those deliverables and make sure that there's an understanding. So Previously, we asked what kind of relationship are you going to have with your COTR and your contract officer. One of the good things to do is to get a clear understanding of what we mean and what are the definitions of the various deliverables, so we don't get into this problem later on. You also have audit agencies that are going to come in to look at, if it's a government piece of business, they're going to look at the deal, the Defense Contract Audit Agency. Even the General Accounting Office may look in some of these major procurements to see, have they been managed properly? Has money just gone down the drain at the taxpayer's expense? In the corporate side, you have internal auditors, you have outside auditors that may be called in to look at the, or even outside management consulting firms that may be asked to come in here to take an unbiased view of how the project is being conducted. From a project management standpoint, we've heard the term earned value, which can also be another check of performance versus the cost. I was on a project where the progress payments were not tied to any specific deliverables. It was a month-to-month project payment schedule over a 3-year period, and we were just claiming the revenue as we went along based on the end of the month. We had no tie to the work that's actually being done. After a year and a half, all the revenue had been accounted for in the P&L statements of the company, yet over half of the work had not even been accomplished. So in one case, one year the project manager looked like a hero. The next project manager who came in because the hero got promoted was now stuck with his bag of worms, where he had a lot of work to get done and no revenue to claim against the expenses. So a lot of things can happen, and these are the little details that you're going to have to be familiar with, and it takes wisdom. And a lot of times these things are only remembered because you have gone through that and you've made that mistake. So we're here to try to help you avoid those type of mistakes that have been made in the past.
Back in our first interview, Tom, we were discussing that there's tremendous pressure on bidders sometimes to promise to do more that they can do. They may promise to do a 10-month job in 6 months, or they may promise to do a $10 million job for $6 million. In our present interview, we're talking about the contract being underway. Here the rubber meets the road. Those promises made earlier to do more than can actually be done, these have got to come and bite the project team, it seems to me. Is that correct?
That certainly is. It's going to come back and haunt you. Let's go back a little bit and talk about what was going on when those decisions were made. Remember, we were talking about the best and final process, and in some cases the corporation's goal was that you got to have at least a 10% profit. So, but we can't meet the cost thresholds that sales thinks you need to win. So there's going to be some cutting down of some of the other costs. In other words, like you said, you got a 10-month project, and you're going to have to show like we can be done in 6 months. So that's one aspect where you're going to have a low cost, and we call that sometimes buy-in, and a lot of times senior management is fooled into thinking, well, we'll make it up through amendments to the contract, etc. If you don't know your customer side very well, that they're not prone to give out a lot of amendments, they want to hold you to your promises, then you've made a critical mistake here in judging what's going to happen after contract award. The other part of that is what I like to call politically correct market penetration, where we don't have any business in, for example, in the energy industry, and we'd like to get some business in the energy industry, but the only way we can get in there is to come in maybe at the lowest bidder. So we've made a conscious decision by the bidders organization to come in with low cost, and we're going to try to make sure that we can perform the contract later on. Now, here we are now in award, and those kind of promises or those assumptions may not have been documented, and there may be some changes in the management structure. And now the game is now looking at the project manager and saying, why aren't you delivering on time, within budget, and making some money on this project? If there isn't enough money in the project and it's been slowed down because of lack of staff or because they can't meet the deliverables, now you got the customer putting pressure on the project manager and his own management team putting pressure on the project manager. So when you do this penetration type of strategy, you want to make sure that you come out with a customer that you can be as a reference for future business in the energy industry. You don't want to end up with a piece of business that has failed in the delivery, that has overrun in its cost, and has a dissatisfied customer because all of the strategy that was taken place early on in getting into this procurement process has gone down the drain. You are getting exactly what you don't want when you do that. And certainly it puts the project manager in a strain and pulling and pushing, and a lot of times project managers just say, I've had enough, I'm walking, I don't want any part of this, and they leave the company. And sometimes you have a lot of turnover because of this type of thing. So the word to the wise is get your project manager identified early, have that person be involved in the decision and say, hey, I can do this or I can't do this, but everybody has to document those assumptions, and a lot of times that doesn't take place, and it becomes a lose-lose situation instead of a win-win.
Now, I once came across a Defense Department study that they actually have some rules of thumb, and I can't remember the details. I don't know if you've come across them, but basically if at a certain percentage point in a project you haven't met a certain something or other. Do you recall, have you come across that study?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, David, because there is a study, and I came across this, and it was very interesting because the Department of Defense had looked at 800 different software development projects, and they determined that none of these had been able to meet the triple constraints. They came up with a rule of thumb that said that if 15% of the schedule had already elapsed, or 15% of the budget had been consumed, that there's no way any of these 800 projects ever got back on schedule or ever made the original specifications or back within the original budget. So what we like to do from a project management standpoint and a project office standpoint is identify where that marker is and making sure that you have some visibility as you're approaching those milestones to say, you know, are we in trouble or do we have some problems, and can we bring these up to the client and see if we can't get these resolved? Because keep in mind that all of this project information is based on estimation, and a lot of times during the proposal process the work breakdown structure hasn't been taken down to enough detail, nor has the schedule. And one of the things we mentioned earlier about getting together with the COTR and the contracting officer early on was to drive that schedule down to the detail, identify what those deliverables are, and get a clear understanding of what we mean when we're complete or when we have a project problem.
Well, let's say that you are, let me make up a number, 35% into a project, and it's occurred to you that there's just no way you're going to be able to meet your promises, and I'm going to make this easy for you. Let's say it's a cost-plus contract, okay? What do you do at this point? There's no way you can deliver. You have a client who's expecting you to deliver, but you don't have the money, or because of various reasons there's no way you're going to meet the schedules. What do you do when you face that situation?
Well, hopefully you've been setting the stage as you move through your progress reports. It's clear that things aren't going as ideal as you would like to. What you don't want to do, and it happens often, is you don't wake up one morning and find out that your project is now in trouble. It's going to get in trouble, each day, and sometimes so deceptively that you can't even figure out when you're creeping away from your schedules or the scope. So, my advice is to make sure you have enough detail in there. But you got to be honest. Bad news doesn't get better with age. It's not like wine. So if you got some problems up front, you want to make sure that those things are brought up early. They're not going to go away. You know, it's better to get the client understanding that they're in this together. It's not an adversarial relationship between you and your client. You got a team. They got to be willing to work on their side as well as you have to be working on your side to get this project together. It's not just them and us. You have to be a team coordinated. So this is where we're talking about building a relationship, how you're going to deal with these various people in the organization, and also getting your senior management on your side to talk to the senior management on the client side. So making sure that everybody understands the ramifications of the project and the importance to success.
Well, then at this particular stage, when people have talked to each other, what is the result? Can you re-baseline or renegotiate some of the promises? What happens at this point?
Well, hopefully that will be the one you want. Is you want to renegotiate, you want to add some more time to the project, you want to add more resources to the project. The client can also terminate you. I mean, they can be so upset at you that, that they don't want any more of this. So you're on thin ice in this area here, and what you have built as a relationship and some trust and understanding will go a long way into be able to get this thing turned to a more profitable deal. Most corporations, whether you're working with the private sector or the government sector, don't want to see you fail because it's a reflection on both sides. For example, if you've been in the project for a year, and to terminate you and to get somebody else in there is going to cost a heck of a lot more than it would be to try to negotiate, try to add a little bit more of money to the project, and a willingness on both sides to say, hey, both of us may have been at fault in making this scheduled delay. And that's where you're trying to negotiate. But if you don't start out after award to start setting the stage for good relationships, setting the stage to say, hey, this is was a general estimate. We have now detailed estimates. We do have a potential problem here, and early warning, I think, will go a long way into trying to rectify that situation that you just described.
Will this approach work on our firm fixed price contract?
It can. It can work on this because you can amend a firm fixed price contract just as easily as you can a cost plus in certain areas. You just have to go about it in a different way. The idea that we bid a fixed price doesn't necessarily mean you can't renegotiate. And I mentioned in previous sittings here that everything is negotiable. So don't think that just because you're in a fixed price contract that you can't open the contract, add more to the fixed price based on things that the client may want or based on things that were actually forgotten in the RFP. Remember, we didn't add anything to it, we responded to it. We may have known right off the bat that there was a loophole in that, and that's a good thing. We take risk, but we also say, hey, yeah, you're right, you forgot about that, you know, and negotiate to get more money into the contract.
Well, Tom, it seems like we've almost completely gone through the life cycle of a contract. We made bid, no bid decisions at the outset. We wrote a proposal. The proposals were reviewed by the customers, by the customer, and then finally an award was granted. In today's session, we've talked about various things that people have to take into account once the contract is underway and you're administering it. It seems like the last thing we've got to talk about here is contract closeout or project closeout and some of the contractual implications. So can you discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, closeout is sometimes the most difficult part of the project management cycle, because it's almost like in a military operation where you're retrograding or retreating and your guns are in the opposite direction. Here we are coming to the close, and a lot of your staff is looking for other opportunities in the company, and they don't want to stay on board, especially if somebody has come to them or the personnel has come to them and say, we got an opportunity for you on another project. So you got to satisfy the customer, you got deliverables that have to take place, you got acceptance testing, you want to make sure that you have a satisfied customer by the end of this project. You also want to take care of your people. You got space issues. You may have rented a space, all of the furniture, all the equipment. That has to be moved out and or distributed to other projects. So you're looking in two directions. You're looking to do the best you can with the people that you have, and keep in mind that you're also downstaffing, because the workload should be getting down to the point where you can close out and turn the lights off, so to speak. Don't make the mistake where leave all your testing to the last phase, because you may not be able to then deliver the project within the specified time. Some things that the agencies and organizations that I've worked for have done is actually ask people that they key personnel to stay on board and give them additional bonus for staying on board right to the end of the project, so that the customer will look at this as a worthy group of people here at the end of the project, and somebody that's still working with them to try to have a completed project to success. There are things that have been learned throughout this project, and we want to make sure that those aren't lost, because we don't want to keep reinventing the wheel in our organization or going through the same minefield each time. We don't want to do the same thing over and over again and accept different results. We want to learn from our mistakes, learn from what we did well, have a satisfied customer. So we want to make sure that we have a debrief of people that have been on the project, what they liked, what they didn't like, where we could make improvement, pass those on through the organization, through the network, or through the project management office if you have one at that time. We want to make sure that the customer is satisfied, and we want to make sure that the customer has now agreed to be a reference. In other words, a reference means that there's a telephone number, there's a name, there's an agency that other interested clients of ours can call and ask about our being able to deliver on time, to be able to provide a competent staff, to be able to stay within the budget, and to have a good working relationship with our project team.
What are some of the paperwork requirements? Because I know as projects are closing out, there's a ton of loose ends to take care of and administrative chores, and again, this is a contract, so we have various final contractual obligations. What are some of those pain in the nitty-gritty details that people got to deal with before final payments are finally made?
Well, prior to the closeout, and you as project manager, you'll know what the contract, how long the contract is supposed to last, and when you're getting down into start thinking about closing out the project, and that should be in your schedule actually, when your closeout phase begins. And here now's the time to get with your contract administrator, get with the COTR, get with the contracting officer on the other side of the house if it's a government contract, and actually sit down and say, what are the requirements? Keep in mind that a lot of this stuff has been forgotten, because this may be a long project, and a lot of people don't really understand what's been in the contract for a period of time. We want to review that. There's been personnel changes on both sides, and we want to make sure that as we approach the closeout that we sit down and we really understand what it takes to close out the project, what it takes to get our final payment, what administrative and legal requirements have to be signed. Is there a signature authority that has to take place up and down the line? These kind of actions have to be looked at, and you have to go back and reread what the RFP said, reread what your proposal said, and reread what your contract said. So these documents, even though they may be 5 or 6 years old, are still valid in terms of legal contractual requirements. So you got to make sure you understand those, and there should be help in your organization from the contract specialists or contract administrators or your lawyers.
Okay, and then when all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted, I guess at that point you get final payment. So any comments on that?
Well, we always like to get final payment, and we also like to get a smile when they send us a check. And we want to make sure that, like I said, the most important thing we're going to get out of this for the long run is not the money per se, because that's going to be invested or spent in some other areas. What it really is that we have a reference in that industry that we can use for further business. And that's why relationships are so important to, and also performance, and making sure that you get the things that you set out to get in this project.
Yeah, it'd be a shame if after working so hard and fighting the fires and developing as good relations with the client as you can, if you bungle these very last steps here, and you can undo everything that you've done over the course of the year and leave a bad taste in the mouth of your client and in your own group as well. Have you ever seen that happen, where people just blew it in the last moment?
Well, I haven't seen it personally, and I know it doesn't make real good business sense. It could happen, and I'm sure it has happened, but you want to make sure that you're still focused. And if you're the project manager, you're going to be pulled. People want to leave. You want to get people to stay. You know who the real performers are, and you know what the client is putting pressure on you to do. And again, there may be some issues that come up right at the last hour that may cause a scope change or something of that nature. So at this point, you have exhausted all your opportunity to gain additional business. It looks like it's going to be completed, and then you're just going to walk away, leave, and making sure that somebody's there to say good things about your performance.
Okay, Tom, we're coming to the end of the program here, and I was wondering if you can summarize in 1 or 2 sound bites any kind of pearls of wisdom you have about contract management, because this will bring us to the end of the three interviews.
Well, the first thing, David, I'd like to wrap up and say, first of all, don't assume everything. Okay, find out what's going on in the RFP, what's going on in your proposal, what's going on in the contract, and refresh your mind as a project manager. As you get new people into the project, and this is going to happen, you want to make sure that they're up to date. You're going to have subcontractors coming in, you're going to have vendors. They're not as up to date on the contract or the information in the RFP or the proposal as you are, or should be. And you want to make sure that when new people come in, spend some time with them, make them read these documents, make them up to speed. I've had some project managers tell me that the people don't need to read the contract. Well, they sure do, because if they're going to be on site with the client, and they're going to end up building a relationship, and they're going to inadvertently or overtly make promises that they may not realize have a major impact on the project. So they have to know whether it's a cost plus contract, whether it's a fixed price, whether they hear opportunities, or we can expand the contract. So keep your people up to speed, no matter whether they started with you or they're now new people coming on board. The other thing that we want to make sure is that we have done our homework, that we understand what the client is, and we have understood where they're going in terms of what they want in their proposal. Don't assume that they know exactly what they're asking for, or don't assume that the whole group understands what they're asking for. You can, in the bid decision, you have to be very careful that this is a good deal for you. I recall agency that asked for a review of their draft RFP, and we planned it out, and it came up to a 15-month project. Going back to the client with some questions and things of that nature, we showed them our schedule, and they said, "This is a 1-year project." And we said, "No, we can't. Help us tell us how we can get to 1 year." And he said, "You're the expert. You're supposed to know how to do that." Well, we can't get to 15 months. He said, "Well, if you don't want to bid it for 1 year, then don't submit the bid at all." Well, we had a problem here. Should we bid it or shouldn't we bid it? I thought we should walk away from the deal because we knew that it was a 15-month deal. Our best estimates were that, and they were asking for 1 year. Well, smarter than people than myself said, we're going to bid it because we can then show them later on that it is a 15-month project. Well, when we did this, 8 months into the project, and we came forward and said, this is not a 15-month this is not a 12-month project, a 15-month project. They said, "You lied to us all along. We don't want that project manager in there. We don't want that regional manager in there. Get them out, and we want somebody in here that's going to be honest with us." Well, here's a case where a couple of people's careers were destroyed based on an improper management decision. So if it doesn't make good business sense, don't assume that you can work things out, making sure that you got enough courage to walk away from some potential piece of business if it's not going to work out in your behalf.